Migrant or Myth? The Mysteries of Solitude's Rarest Inhabitants by Pamela Baker. Chapter 7. A sighting of the so-called Flower People thought to live in Evandark. What follows is a transcript of an interview this author had with a long-serving member of the Rangers Guild. The man in question, who goes by the name Ryder Frost, had recently returned from a solo expedition that skirted the edge of the dangerous jungle region known as Evandark. Upon returning from this expedition, he told stories of the strange, plant-like creatures he encountered beneath the dark boughs of that forbidden jungle. It took some doing, but I managed to track down Mr. Frost at a tavern in Shadow Falls, where we, along with my faithful scribe Minuet, sat down over an ale to discuss his experience. At this hour, the tavern is darkly lit and sparsely attended. Only a few other rough-looking rangers and a burly bartender, on the brink of nodding off, are present. When the brooding rangers bother to look up from their strong and foamy libations, they regard me, a slight and bright-eyed academic, with dismissive, almost pitying glances. As Ryder returns from the counter with a pair of ales, I hope that the sputtering candle at the center of our table doesn't burn out before our conference is complete, lest Minuet and I ruin our journals with blind scribbles.
Here you go.
Ryder's voice is as lonely and rough as the lost country roads upon which he frequently treads. "Thank you, sir," say I, accepting the outstretched mug graciously.
Least I can do. You're paying me for a story I've been telling free for well past a year now.
He looks to Minuet.
Sure I can't get you something, pretty miss?
Minuet smiles abashedly. "Only a story, good ranger." Ryder nods and leans forward over the table, his gray eyes gleaming under the brim of his hood. I can't help but lean towards him.
You must have heard the gist of it, if you came to find me. What part did you want to know more about?
Minuet and I exchange a glance, and set our quills to paper. I begin my line of questioning. To begin with, where did your encounter take place?
I was hoofing it a ways over the edge of the Sovereign border, maybe 25 days out of River Watch. There's no markers or trails once you get in Evandark, so I won't be able to say exactly where I was till the cartographers draw out the map I kept.
And why were you there? Ryder shrugs.
Evandark's a dangerous place. You go too far in and you won't ever come out. But nobody knows where that edge of death is exactly. Ain't uncommon for some of us in the guild to test it out every now and then, see how close we can get to the interior before things start getting weird.
And how close did you get? Ryder shrugs again.
On this trip, closer than anyone's still alive, I'd bet.
On the day in question, what specifically were you doing? How did you come across this strange being?
I was heading south, down into a wide valley with a bunch of huge trees. Types I'd never seen before. It was rough going, muddy, buggy. I couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead in most places. Ferns and vines were that thick. When I got to the valley floor, there was a clear spot, with one of those big trees right at the center. And when I say clear, I mean it. There was nothing on the ground but gnarly roots and moss halfway up my shins. It was like the tree wouldn't let anything bigger than that grow on its patch of ground. I was walking under it, gawking at the branches, and the thing started branching out maybe 15 feet over my head, and the limbs looked like the spokes on a wagon wheel, only there was more of them. Felt like walking under the ceiling of a sanctuary. Anyway, I was looking up into the branches when I stepped on something funny and heard a sound like someone gasping for air. Next thing I know, something grabs my leg, and I got my dirk out in a flash. Would have took the arm off if it hadn't let go of me just as quick.
What did it look like? Ryder sits back in his chair, his head tilting towards the ceiling. His eyes are looking elsewhere. Else when?
Only saw the arm at first. Thought it was a human wearing forest dress for a blink or two. Nope. It was like a branch, wrapped tight with vines and leaves. The fingers were smooth twigs and bark nubs where they bent. The arm started falling back into the moss, and I followed up and saw eyes looking at me. Not human eyes. They were Well, I can't say I've ever seen anything quite like 'em, but they reminded me of water lilies floating on a still pond. There was white and pink and orange and red too, I think. Loveliest things I've ever seen.
He pauses. His jaw clenches and his eyes narrow. Minuet thinks I don't see her frown.
The rest of her face was beautiful too.
Her?
I'm thinking so. She looked human, but her face was made of plants and wood just like the rest of her. Her cheeks were like the skin of a plum, but pale and more delicate-like. Her hair was like vines as thin as thread with tiny red flowers growing out of them. Her lips were thin, like the petals on a daisy. She was laying there, half buried in the moss, staring up at me like a sick pup looks at its maw. Every now and then she'd gasp, like she couldn't breathe, or she was in pain, something like that.
What did you do next?
Took me a minute, but I knelt down next to her and pulled her up, careful as I could, till she was resting on my shoulder. Her body was just like the rest of her, all leaves and bark and vines and flowers, made in the shape of a human. She felt real light. I figured maybe she was hurt, so I let her rest on me for a while, even gave her some food and water. She wouldn't eat, but she let me run some water over her lips.
Did you get the sense that she was intelligent? Did she speak to you?
Yeah, I was getting to that. I sat there with her maybe 6 or 7 minutes, but then she starts acting fidgety. Her eyes looked like they were getting darker, and she started trembling. I tried to calm her down, told her I'd bring her to a cleric. After that, she reached up and brushed my cheek with her fingers. They were cool, smooth. She looked me dead in the eye, serious as a storm cloud, and whispers one word.
What was it? Ryder's face darkens.
Run.
The table falls silent for a long moment while I compose myself. Did you?
Not at first, but she started pushing me away, getting more and more agitated. Wasn't until then I noticed the jungle had gone real quiet, and that's never good. So I let her down, all gentle, covered her up best I could, and headed back the way I came. I was halfway up the hill before something came at me.
Was it another being, like this flower woman?
Doubt it. It jumped down on me from above, swinging some kind of weapon I never got a good look at. It was wrapped up in a hood and cloak, green and brown to match the jungle. It was man-sized, and I saw a gloved hand, but it never said a word. Barely got my sword up in time to parry the first stab. We knocked steel for a few seconds, and I could tell the thing was stronger than me, and it wanted me dead. Made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up like they never did before. I got lucky. It caught its arm on a vine, and I slashed its face and put a foot in its gut, sent it rolling down the hill. Then I turned tail and ran fast as I could. Didn't stop till I got to the top of the rise. When I did, I took a bit to catch my breath and looked back down into the valley. I could hear trees shaking from all the way up there. Something big was down there. Maybe a bunch of somethings. Whatever it was, I wasn't staying to meet it. I took off north as fast and as quiet as I could. The hairs on the back of my neck didn't lay back down till I'd put a half-dozen miles or more between me and that valley.
A harrowing escape. I assume your expedition came to an end after that?
Yeah. Picked up my horse from the little village I left it in halfway back to the River Watch, then took off east over the desert. Didn't want to go north through the forests that way, just in case something was still on my tail. Didn't sleep much till I got to Madra. Caught a ship to Chasm's Gate a little after that, and made my way back to guild headquarters from there.
Do you think you'll go back one day, to see if you can find the flower woman again? Ryder closes his eyes and shakes his head. I can tell he's sad but resolute.
Nope. Her? She saved my life. I won't waste that. So I ain't never going back to that valley.